Hello Bannerlords. Today, I would like to share a clip where I used a tactical retreat to win a night battle. The enemy outnumbered me with a party of 61 against mine of 56. Although outnumbered, I was not outgunned as my troops were slightly more experienced. Do note that I lost many infantry units in a fight before this. As such, the party composition might look a little odd. I start the battle by arranging the various formations as a precaution against an enemy rush.
Stand up, infantry! Move! Loose formation! Mounted! Follow me! Cavalry!
I then led all mounted units up the hill on the right for a height advantage. After closer observations, I noticed that only the enemy's mounted ranged units were approaching. I stationed the mounted ranged units on the hill before leading the mounted melee units into the incoming threat. Usually, I would command my ground range units to hold fire till the enemy was around a distance of 140. I decided not to do that because I lacked ground melee units with shields as protection. Instead, I chose to charge in with mounted melee units to attempt to destroy the threat. Notice the command to follow me. It was a precaution to ensure the mounted melee units did not overextend and get within killing range of the enemy ground range units. Note that charging is the most effective way to get your mounted melee units to kill enemies. Do exercise caution as you do not have control of exactly where they will charge. The opponent had stopped moving and is currently bunkering behind a shield wall. It is disadvantageous to attack with only the mounted units at this point. As such, I commanded all ground units to reposition on this hill. Let's briefly go through what happened as well as the game plan. After organizing the formations and moving uphill on the right, I led the mounted melee units into the enemy mounted range units, destroying them. Since the opponent remained stationary, I made preparations for all units to be repositioned on the hill to rain arrows from a distance. I realized that the enemy had started firing arrows at my mounted units and decided to back away while the ground units were still making their way to position. Upon looking back, I became aware that the enemy had also begun advancing. I moved my ranged units to fire at the enemy to hinder them and hopefully eliminate some. As the enemy got closer, I commanded the troops to fall back, a short distance at a time, ensuring a continuous rain of arrows. The key is to maintain that distance as you back away. The enemy commanders seemed to be aware of what I was doing and sent their mounted units ahead to disrupt. As a countermeasure, I led the mounted melee units in to assist. The ideal outcome would be to destroy the entire formation of mounted units before the rest of the troops are close enough to engage. Do remember to keep a watchful eye on the mounted units. Ensure they do not move towards the enemy ground units at this point. Periodically check that your troops are facing the right direction. To recap briefly, the opponent started firing arrows at the mounted units before I could get the rest of the troops into position. As a precaution, I moved the mounted units further away while the ground troops made their way to the destination. As they got close, I ordered the mounted ranged units to join them to fire at the opponent's forces, slowing them down. Next, I ordered the ground ranged and melee units to fall back while the mounted ranged unit continued firing. As the enemy forces got closer, I commanded the mounted troops to fall back as well. The opponent then decided to counter my tactic by sending their mounted melee units towards my ground units. My counter to that was to charge in with the mounted units to eliminate as many of theirs. After dealing considerable damage to the enemy mounted melee formation, I commanded my troops to fall back while firing arrows as they moved. I finished the few remaining enemy mounted units by charging with the mounted melee units again. At this point, the enemy commander's best tactic is to use the shield wall formation with the ground melee units and push towards me with the support of the ground range units from behind.
Infantry! Horsemen!
I decided to break the shield wall by having the mounted and ground range units split to fire from 2 different directions.
Archer! Archer! Horseman!
Realizing that the situation had become dire, the enemy backline had decided to desert, leaving the enemy front line unsupported.
Move! Turn!
I moved forward and killed one of the deserters to be sure, and for good measure. It was time to execute the final blow by commanding the mounted and ground melee units to charge. Let us take a look from the top down again. After eliminating the enemy mounted melee units, I commanded both formations of ranged units to fire at the enemy from 2 different directions. This action reduces the effectiveness of shield walls. The mounted melee units were then sent towards the rear of the enemy forces as a setup for a cavalry charge.
Horse archer! Follow your sergeants! Rider!
At last, the battle was won. The enemy was defeated without a single loss. If you have enjoyed this video and other videos like this, do support me by clicking the like and subscribe button. I have also created a Twitter account to share details on upcoming videos and gather community feedback. Details are in the description below.